Reading with your kids.
Ciao, hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jevly, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are here to help families grow closer together through reading. Thank you for being part of our beautiful family. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Amazon Music, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Sailaja Joshi and Sheetal Sheeth. They are here to celebrate Always Anjali. Hey, before our guest comes in, we gave a sneak preview of the Solve It for Kids podcast here on Reading with Your Kids, and it was so popular, it's like spun off. It spun off into its own thing. And my buddy, our dean of all things STEM and STEAM, Jennifer Swanson, is here to tell us a little bit about what's going on with this great new podcast. Hey, Jennifer, what's up?
Hi, Jed. Oh, I am so excited about our new podcast. We've been getting some great reviews. Everybody wants to find out what's going on and meet and listen to some of our scientists and engineers. We have done how do you map an underwater forest?
Yeah.
We have done how do you cut a person in half safely, of course.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
We have talked about improving your connection with water by going on a water walk, and we have watched Vanessa Brantley Newton create illustrations that come to life.
I took a water walk with my amazing niece. We had such a great time. I didn't fall into the water, but it was really, really fun. And I love the fact that all of our guests are giving our wonderful listeners challenges, really fun challenges that they can do together as a family. And that's so cool. Hey, tell everybody where they can find Solve It for Kids, because it's not on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. It's its own thing.
So please, if you want to keep listening, go over to iTunes and Apple Podcasts and subscribe. And you can download all 4 of the first episodes that we have, plus listen to all the new ones we have coming out. You can also find on Stitcher Radio and, of course, through our website, solveitforkids.com.
Jennifer, thanks so much. Thanks for letting me be part of this awesome, awesome, awesome podcast.
Well, we make a great STEM team, don't you think?
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, join us over at solveitforkids.com. Joining us on the line right now from Boston and New York. It's a publisher and author relationship. I'm really excited. Please welcome to the show Sailaja Joshi and Sheetal Sheeth. My friends, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having us, Jed.
Thank you.
To be here.
Yeah, that first voice you heard was Sheetal. She is the author of Always Anjali, and she's based in New York. Why don't we begin by you telling us a little bit about your book?
So this is Sheetal. Mm-hmm. I live in New York, yes, and I wrote the book called Always Anjali, which is about a 7-year-old girl who can't find her name on a license plate or on anything really, and in the process gets bullied for it and decides that she wants to change her name to, quote, fit in, and of course realizes that she's perfect exactly the way she is. She learns the meaning of her name, where it comes from, why it's really special, and so she learns to own it, celebrate it, and be herself, and realize that it's actually a great thing to be different.
You bring up something that I experienced as a kid, going with the family on vacations, and I'm old enough to remember a time when, about the only souvenir that you would find at every tourist spot was that license plate that had all these names on it. And it seemed to have every single name in the world except for mine. I never, ever found a license plate with my name on it.
I believe it. I mean, Jed as well. It's not necessarily a common, quote, traditional name. But, what's surprising to me is even in 2020, Jed, when I live in New York, so I go to these souvenir shops, is there still like the same 20 names? And I'm like, oh my God, how have we not moving forward from this? Maybe they've added a few, like Spanish names. I think that they feel like they've somehow assimilated a little bit, but we've really come, I don't know why we haven't moved forward in this, but, and why it's so easy to personalize everything now. So I'm not sure why that's not available, but, it's a huge, pet peeve of mine. So I hear you.
Yeah. Now, did the inspiration for this particular story come from your own experience? I imagine you didn't see a lot of Sheetals on license plates as you traveled.
I did not see a lot of Sheetals anywhere. When I was thinking about Anjali and the books I wanted to write, the most important thing for me was to write an American family in a way that I hadn't seen before. And her and her family, Anjali and her family, are very much an American family who live on your block, who are just as American as everybody else. And I really wanted brown kids to feel normalized and not feel othered. And so that was the primary goal of this book series. And then when I thought about the stories of what Anjali was going to go through, I really wanted to talk about things that I didn't see talked about in children's book as much, in these narratives. And so, yes, of course you pull from personal experience. I pulled from my experience. I pulled from friends' experiences across the board. I was told that I had to change my name in order to work. My other full-time job is that of an actress, and I was told that I would never work if I kept my name. And I did lose jobs because I refused to change my name. It still comes up. So I thought to myself, if this was happening to me as an adult, and I know it's happening to kids, I just wanted to write a book that should show kids that, they should never feel less than for any reason, having to feel like they had to change any part of themselves.
Absolutely. That seems so silly to me. You're losing jobs as an actress because of your name, but you're going to be in whatever production you're going to be in, you're going to be using a different name.
That's true. They make a very good point. You're playing a different character, but, a lot of those conversations, the majority of those were happening, when I started in the business, which was over 20 years ago. And, there weren't a lot of people like me acting, in mainstream film and TV. And so, not that I'm justifying it at all. Mm-hmm. And I think it's horrible to say to me, but I think that they were uncomfortable and they just wanted to, see, and by the way, there's a lot of people who have changed their name, because they wanted to get jobs. And so, to each their own, but it's been proven. I know so many people who told me stories about once they changed their name, the phone rang more. And that happens in all industries. I've heard stories of people in other jobs too, when they have resumes with certain names on it. I have a friend named Mohammed. So if you have a name Mohammed on a resume, you can imagine how sometimes that might not be received, unfortunately, as well as a John.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, yeah. Now, Sailaja, you're the president and the founder of Mango and Marigold Press. And we wouldn't have great books like Always Anjali without publishers. What inspired you to create your publishing company?
Yeah. So, hi, everyone. My name is Sailaja Joshi, and I am CEO, although I sort of dig the title president, CEO and founder of Mango and Marigold Press. And so my journey to becoming a publisher really started with my journey of motherhood. I was pregnant with my daughter 7 years ago, and I was having this library-themed baby shower. And I was looking for books that represented my culture, history, and heritage. And there was stuff out there, for sure. But the stuff that was there was developmentally inappropriate, culturally inaccurate, or worse, like culturally insensitive or incorrect. And I couldn't believe, I grew up here in the United States. I am proudly Indian American. India has over 1 billion people. And how wasn't there representation in children's literature? I just couldn't fathom it. And I sat with it for a little bit. And then finally one day I was lamenting to a friend in a car ride. And she turned to me and she's like, so why don't you do something about it? And so I did. I left my PhD program. I took $1,000 of startup capital. and created what was then known as Bharat Babies. Since then, we've transformed and shifted our name to Mango and Marigold Press. And over the course of the past 5-6 years, we've produced over 20 titles across 6 different product categories with the vision and mission to share the sweet and savory stories of the South Asian experience. And people often ask me, they're like, what is the South Asian experience? And I'm like, exactly. I think so many people try to commodify it and put it into a box. And instead, what I'm really interested in hearing, seeing, and exploring is what the South Asian experience looks like and feels like to my authors and illustrators who would identify in that way, and how they want to express their stories. And so our publishing house is very different from a lot of the big 5 in a variety of different ways. But I think mostly my vision and mission now, more than ever, is to share the stories that have constantly gone untold.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, one of the things that's been something real fun for me with this podcast is I've gotten to know about a lot of different cultures, having authors on from all over the world. And, you know, when you're asked that question of what is the South Asian experience, you know, just the little bit that I've learned about India, it's impossible to put that in a package. I mean, from my understanding, there's 28 official languages in India, and probably 10 times that many languages that are unofficial. So when you're talking about India, you're talking about this amazing rainbow of languages and cultures and people.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, too, India is not monolithic. It has different religions, different communities, different languages that so frequently get, put into one little silo. And I really wanted to break that. You know, for instance, my family is from southern India. And so I didn't grow up speaking Hindi. I grew up speaking Telugu. I didn't grow up doing Bhangra. I grew up doing Bharatanatyam. I grew up doing a lot of different things, and just imagine what it's like to see the one South Indian character on TV and for them to still not represent you, for them to be nowhere near what you are or what you represent. And so I really wanted to challenge what we thought of as India in the beginning, and then started to broaden it much more to South Asia, because I realized that so much of this experience has continued to be really quieted in mainstream publishing, to be silenced. And I always say this to people, I refuse to live in a world where my daughter won't see herself on the cover of a book. Mm-hmm. So that's what was the impetus for the publishing house. And now the reality is she has many books to choose from, and that's wonderful, but I want to do so much more. Yeah.
Now, I'll put this question out to both of you. Sailaja, you were mentioning that, you know, you thought that that the South Asian experience was not being shown in books. Do you think that was a decision that was made with malice to hide people who are different, or was it marketing? Oh, gee, I don't think we can sell these books.
Oh, it's a great question and a provocative question. And I think it's twofold. I think there certainly were the folks who control the space didn't represent the communities who were trying to get their stories told, much like how Sheetal talks a little bit about how, as an actress, changing your name is really, really common. In order to get those jobs, I mean, authors were frequently asked to water down and whitewash their books in order to appeal to a quote unquote broader audience. And I think there was this hypothesis that for some reason that brown stories that featured brown characters only had to be read by brown audiences. And that's just factually incorrect. And I think my publishing house is an example of that. And not only that, I grew up reading literature that only featured white characters, and I made it through okay. And so I think it certainly is about those in power, those who are reading the stories and those who are approving that pipeline and getting things through. And then a very close-minded vision of what would sell. Because frankly, these if it's a good story, a child will read it. That's it. You know, children are wonderful creatures who will read something that's exciting and read something that's engaging to them. And that's what it means. And so, yeah, I think it was it's a little bit of both. And I think things are changing, but at a molasses pace, if you will.
And I'll just add that I think what I've seen with publishing houses, kind of the more traditional, bigger ones, is they have books, but they're very token. You know, they're very like, oh, I have this book, I have that book. No, I do it. They kind of like check the box. And as Sailaja just said, they're really either inaccurate or insensitive, and they're whitewashed. And then on top of it, you know, when you have an own voices author who puts something out there, they're not putting the same resources behind them. So if you were to put the machine behind every author, like you would, you know, your top whoever offers that they deem to be, quote, broad in audience, you'll see how people receive it. People want it. We see it in my other industry as well, in the entertainment industry. People want to see these stories. You have to give them a chance, and you have to put your resources behind it, and marketing and advertising and all of those things, and it will do well. We've shown it over and over and over again, and people are pounding their desks saying, please, please, please give me this. And I think people are starting to come around, as she said, but it's important to, again, you know, until there's systematic change in the higher ups, in the positions of power, it's not going to trickle down as fast as we want it to.
Yeah. We've talked a lot here about the importance of kids seeing themselves represented in the pages of books. And this has been a conversation that we've been having a lot here on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. But I also just want to throw out to you and ask both of you, how important is it, do you think, for a typical kid, for a white kid in the suburbs to see and read about characters who are different, to read about Asian and South Asian and African and a rainbow of characters?
I think it's vital. It is such a vital part of breaking what exists now. The challenges that we are having, the challenges that we've had this year really highlights so much of the structural racism that exists. And often in my pitches, often in my conversations, I talk about how very frequently people are excited to give me a place at the board, in the boardroom, at the table. You know, I'm a brown woman and they're like, yes, representation, diversity. And I'm like, yeah, I'm here. I'm also a smart woman. And then I ask them, well, where is this representation on the bookshelf? Our books, and very frequently when we're at events, when we could do live events, I would get a woman, often a mom, who would come up and be like, this is such a great book. I have so many Indian friends who would love this. And I'm like, that's really great. What about you? And there's this pause. There's always this pause where they truly, in this moment, haven't realized just how internalized they've made this moment. And they're like, you're right. I'm like, it's a book. It's a great book that every child deserves. So having this representation in every home allows for children to have the opportunity to ask questions and to see something other than themselves. And that's so vital to creating a empathetic community and generation.
Yeah.
And you know, I'll tell you a story. When I was at an event for Always Anjali, and I was talking about the book, a really, I will say, like, so honest and brave white woman stood up, and she admitted to a crowd of over 200 people, she said, oh my God, as I'm sitting here listening to you talk, I just realized when I think of all the books on my kids' bookshelves, they're all of white kids. And she said, I'm saying that not because she's like, I'm embarrassed because it's not a purposeful thing. It's just I'm not being thoughtful about it. And the problem is, as we talked about structurally, when you go into the bookstores or the traditional booksellers, again, where do they put all of these books? They other us. They say, oh, that's the diversity section. That's the book about that. And all these books should be just as mainstream as the others, as Sila just said. They should be in the same front little display as the kid with the pet, and so there's no reason why it can't. And she so rightly said, I really need to do better. I want to present the world for my kids in the way that they're going to live it. And obviously it's not just going to be white people or white kids and their dogs. I mean, there's still more books about animals than there are kids of color. Mm-hmm. There's only
all
8
kids of colors.
Yeah, all kids. Exactly. And so, it's really about us. People always say to me, what can we do right now? And I said, from when your kid is a baby, you're reading to them. Make sure you're reading to them and showing them kids. Just introduce a world that you want them to be a part of, a just world, a colorful world that represents so many people. And then, like Sila just said, they'll have questions. They'll want to know. That's how you raise understanding, empathetic people. And we certainly aren't doing a great job if you see the leadership right now and where they are in the lack of connection. And so it's up to us to really make sure that we surround our kids with books that reflect society as a whole.
Absolutely. That it's, we here in our home, we're a bicultural home. We've had international kids live with us from all over the world. It's such a blessing. It's such a wonderful thing. And if you're not in a position where you can host international kids, or you're not in living in a neighborhood that is has a variety of rainbow of people in it, make sure your family library has that rainbow of characters, so your kids can just experience all the beauty of the world. Because that's, I think, what I love vanilla ice cream, but boy, if that's the only thing I can have, that's pretty boring.
Right. Totally. Agreed.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think it really also, having books that showcase children doing different colored children, different communities of children doing similar things as your child, also just helps them, roots them in a different reality. Yesterday I was doing this podcast and the host was talking about how her name was Molly, and she has this book that features a Black girl named Molly who's being brave, and her son asked the question, why is Molly Black? And she was just like, because there are Black people named Molly. And that was it. But that was a beautiful moment there where she created this space through this book, through this piece of literature, for her child to ask what some people might feel is a sensitive question in a very comfortable way, that he could all of a sudden realize his little worldview. And I thought that was really interesting and insightful, in a great way in which books can help to be those, windows, mirrors, and doors, as Dr. Rudine Bishop Smith says.
Yeah. I love that. I love the idea that books give our kids license to ask questions, give them that safe place to ask questions. And I remember growing up seeing people who were different than me, and the thing that I heard from my mother, my grandmother, don't stare, don't ask questions, just look ahead. And and if they heard a different language, my grandmother, who I love, who is an awesome person, but if she heard somebody in her vicinity speaking a different language, she was sure that they were talking about her. And and I'm like, probably not. So I'm really happy that Mango and Marigold Press exist to get these stories out there and to help families add some color and some different culture to their family libraries. Before we go, Sheetal, you told me that there's a new Anjali book coming out soon. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, thank you. So the next book in the series is called Bravo Anjali, and it follows Anjali dealing with being the only girl in a room of all boys. She plays the tabla, which is an Indian drum set, if people don't know, and it's a predominantly, usually traditionally boy-played instrument, although there's amazing women who play tabla, but it's definitely leans towards boys at this moment. And so she's the only girl in the class and she's the best, and the boys don't like that. And so we follow her, having to figure out how to own her excellence and not be afraid to be great at something. And the boys really make her feel bad at being good at something. And so she has to learn to never dim her light, which she learns to do. And then at the end, we celebrate her, and that's why it's called Bravo Anjali. But it's a really, important story, I think, for boys and girls to talk about this, because it happens when we're children. And so, and obviously it continues on as adults, and boys and girls need to talk about this young.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've said this story on the show in the past. When I was growing up, the best athlete in our neighborhood was my cousin Darlene. And she was an amazing athlete, and we would go to different neighborhoods to play a baseball game, and adults would come out and go, "She can't play." And I said, "Why not?" "Because she's a girl." It was the dumbest thing ever. And I'm sorry to say, I'm still hearing it now almost 100 years later.
I know. Well, that's my point, is that these things that we're talking about in these books, sadly, are more relevant than ever, actually. It's not even like they're becoming less relevant. They're becoming more relevant. And we need to talk about it. And, as we talked about, earlier when I started writing these books, it's as we said, there is no illustrated book series that features a brown person, a South Asian brown person, and Anjali is the first. And I think that's important. It's surprising. I mean, it's shocking, but not surprising that's where we are. As you just said, when you say it's 100 years later and it's still around, and I'm like, that's the point. Like, it is shocking, but not surprising, because this is where we are. And so we have to just keep pushing the needle. And the fact is that there's over 1 billion, how many of us? And there still wasn't an illustrated book series in America that represents us as American people. It's shocking.
Yeah, it is.
And unacceptable.
It is. And one of the things that I think a lot of people would find shocking is, I don't know how long your family has been here, but probably longer than my family's been here.
Maybe. Who knows? But we're all American, and all of us come from somewhere, and we all have, like you said, a beautiful, rich rainbow history that we should be bringing into our daily lives and celebrating.
Yeah, absolutely. Sailaja, where can folks go to find out more, not only about Anjali, but also about all the books that are coming out from Mango and Marigold?
Yeah, so you can visit our website, mangoandmarigoldpress.com. That's one of the best ways to support us. We will happily ship out from you, and when you buy directly from us, you're able to help ensure that we're able to continue to produce books. Next, a great place to go is bookshop.org or IndieBound, and help to support your favorite local indie bookstore. And then, if you must, go ahead and head to some of the larger retailers like Amazon. But know that the best way to support us is buying directly through us or utilizing your favorite indie bookstore.
Yeah, and I love to say this, especially now. Chances are indie bookstores, they have a limited shelf space, so there's a good chance you'll go in there and Anjali won't be available on a shelf. But if you ask your indie bookstore owner to order it, they will get it. And if they hear, "Hey, I want Anjali, can you order that for us?" They're going to get the clue, and they're going to start to stock it.
Exactly. We are a small bootstrapped publishing house that is working against some pretty big giants. So every time a listener, a follower, a fan can go to their local store and advocate for us and ask that question, like, where are the Mango and Marigold Press books? It means the world to us, and it means that we will get what we need.
Yeah, and the same goes for your public library. If you go and request a book too, that's a real great way to help authors of every author. So I'm really excited. I had a delightful time speaking with both of you. I want to thank both of you. We've been talking with the author and publisher of Always Anjali, Sheetal Sheeth and Sailaja Joshi. My friends, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Jay.
Thank you for having us. And thank you for being such a champion of all books and the independent world as well. It's so important. We appreciate it.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Tashay Mason. She'll be here to celebrate, but I don't want to say goodbye. That's the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Hey, please visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Sign up for our newsletter. It really gives you a great idea of what's coming up on the show. Also lets you know what just happened this past week, what you might have missed from our library of over 900 episodes. Hard to believe we've published 900 episodes. There are some amazing interviews in that library. So check it out today, readingwithyourkids.com. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to thank our guests, Sailaja Joshi and Sheetal Sheeth. I want to thank my team, Alejandra Doherty, Fatima Khan, our intern, Alexia Brown. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.